Welcome to the RAMP webinar series. This is Section 9, School Counseling Core Curriculum Results Reports. Each component of the RAMP application has a point value. This one is worth 6 points, which is one of the highest points you can receive on any component. So this is a pretty important component to pay attention to. I'm Mark Rams.
And I'm Karen Griffith.
We want to bring your attention to the fact that the RAMP rubric is critical to this process, and you always want to check the website to make sure you're using the most current RAMP rubric. Not that it's changed frequently, but sometimes there are small tweaks, and we want to make sure you're using the latest edition. But regardless, the procedures we're going to talk about today in this webinar presentation aren't impacted by those small tweaks in the rubric, so it's really going to be fine. We just want to really stress that the rubric is critical to guiding you through this application process. It's what the reviewers will use to evaluate your application, so you really need to pay attention to the rubric.
So the core curriculum results report, you can look for more information in the implementation guide, pages 157 to 163, and we really encourage you to do that. There are examples and lots more information there. The results report is the analysis of the 3 lessons that you submitted along with the action plan in Section 8. So now we are simply focused on those 3 specific lessons. They must be the same lessons that you submitted in Section 8. We're looking at the results of those and analyzing them. And the hope is that it demonstrates your effectiveness in program and classroom activities, and that the analysis informs how to do it better next time.
The core curriculum results report is a template that you download from the ASCA website. So it's really important that you're summarizing the 3 exemplary lessons that you shared in Section 8. You can't share different ones. You have to share those 3. Those may be 3 from a unit that you presented to 6th graders, or they may be 3 distinct lessons, one shared with 9th graders, one shared with 10th graders, and one taught to 11th graders. It doesn't matter. The key here is the data story, being able to actually talk about the process, perception, outcome data, and tell us what you've learned, what the kids learned, how did it impact, and you do that by sharing some graphs and charts. So you want to share a graph or a chart that captures what the perception data tells you about what the students learned, what new skills, what new attitudes, what new knowledge they got. So that chart, that graph, has to have some good titles on it. It just can't be a pie graph with percentages without some explanation. If it's a bar graph and it's analyzing the 4 items that you administer in a pre-post, we need to know what those items were. So it needs to make sense. Try to think about someone who doesn't necessarily have any background on understanding and reading charts. So you make it very simple, very clean, and convey the impact that has had on your students. The results report also expects you to talk about implications. What have you learned? How will you move forward? Are you going to tweak these lessons? Would you increase the number of lessons? Would you add some new information? Have you discovered that some of the things you taught the students already knew, had a good handle on, so you're going to take that out of the lesson? We want to know what the implications are for next steps, how you're going to improve, and how the information that you've collected and analyzed is going to inform next steps.
So let's talk about the data for just a minute, because what we're looking for here is not just the appropriate collection of data, but the appropriate analysis of the data. It's more than simply measuring. It's measuring and using what you learn through that measurement to do things better next time. So process data are the basic facts. How many students, how many activities, how many lessons, how long did the lessons last, when was it delivered, how was it delivered. Those are just the basic facts around what happened. Perception data is where you report the changes in students that occurred due to the instruction or the interventions that you delivered. They focus on attitudes, knowledge, and skills. Think of beliefs or thoughts that you have tried to change or develop in students. Increased knowledge that you've given them. Increased skills. Typically, perception data is best when there is a pre and a post that helps you understand the difference between before you intervened and after. And you want to compare those. The measures are guided by the mindsets and behaviors. There are webinars available through the website that teach you how to do that. That might be something helpful. And then including clear and relative charts that really summarize that perception data and demonstrates how different the kids are now because of your intervention. Simple, clear, reflective of what the changes were. And finally, outcome data are reporting the changes in students' academics, in their behaviors, and in attendance. Outcome data must always link back to academics, behavior, and attendance. Those are the only three possibilities for outcome data.
Core curriculum results report. So just some tips for writing this. You know, you want to really provide some conversation, some thinking around the types of data collected. What did you notice? Did you see some growth in some of the skills you taught, but maybe not in some of the other skills you taught? So what worked? What's your thinking behind why some things were better received by the students than other things? What didn't work? And you know, how will you use that information? You have to talk about how you're going to maybe do some things differently. What are the next steps? What did you like? And you're really going to repeat, and maybe you decided, for example, that you tried to teach too much in a short period of time. So you're going to scale back and really focus on maybe one mindset and behavior and really delve into that mindset and behavior. So this isn't about, you know, you did well or you did poorly, you were good or bad. This is about what have you learned and how are you going to behave differently to impact student success.
Yeah, this implication section of the results report is singularly important. It must be thoughtful. It's not just a recitation of the data that you collected. It's about what you've learned through the data you collected. And then you're going to submit a narrative. And again, the narratives have limited word frames that you have to operate within, but there's always a description. And the top half of this slide tells you what the narrative is expecting from you. And what we've done is turn that into a bulleted list with two sections. So you're going to write paragraphs on the following. The first, you're going to talk about the analysis of the effectiveness of these lessons. What worked, what didn't work. Why might it not have worked? And then you're going to talk about how what you've learned from those results and from that analysis is going to help you do it better next time. It's all about those next steps. How are you going to do it better?
So I think a really good example is oftentimes you see school counselors say, we got some improvements in terms of our data. Kids able to demonstrate they learned some skills. We impacted behavior, but we think that we could do more if we had more time with the students. So you'll see school counselors reflect and say, we worked with the group of students 4 times over a period of 6 weeks. We really need to maybe push that to 6 times, 7 times over 20 weeks. Or we need to build in periodic follow-ups. That's the kind of next steps in terms of how it's going to inform future counseling activities that the report is looking for.
So this is an example of results report around one lesson. This is from 4th grade goal setting lesson. It was presented during their specials rotation. The counselors had took that time slot in which to deliver it. It talks about 2 mindsets and behaviors that they used to focus this lesson. There were 199 of 210 4th grade students who were present for the lesson, and it lasted 45 minutes. That's the process data. The perception data column talks about students developing goals and 3 steps that help them achieve those goals, writing journal responses, looking at the goals for SMART format analysis, an end-of-year survey, and how students responded to that survey. So there's a lot of different examples of the perception data that they used to measure the effectiveness of this goal-setting lesson. And for the outcome lesson, this is the big so what, and it's always tied to achievement, attendance, and behavior. And for this lesson, they looked at the end-of-year report card grades, because truly that's the ultimate impact that you want goal setting to have, for the grades to go up. And so that's where they looked to see if grades improved. And this is included as an exemplar because their outcome data was fine, but it wasn't perfect. There were still some children who actually their grades went down, or some that simply maintained. You know, 2/3 of them got better, but not everybody. So we're not expecting perfection. What they want to see is, did you measure it really well, and do you understand what your results are telling you? And the implication column is how you understand and what you're going to do differently. So you can look at on the implications column where they talk about what happened with the data and what they think that means. And most importantly, down there at the bottom it says the future plans include. Well, they're going to drop it down to 3rd grade because they need to begin the process earlier so kids get more practice around goal setting. They're going to teach it earlier in the year. They're going to include the teachers in the process for monitoring the progress of the goal work. And then they're going to do some periodic celebration for steps along the way. So this is a very clear and good example around how a lesson was analyzed and what they learned about how to do it differently next time.
So in the National Model Implementation Guide, there's always a section for each component that talks about do's and don'ts. I think this is a good place to go when you're completing this activity and you've implemented it, you're looking at kind of the implications, and use this as a self-check. You know, did you really address all 3 types of data? And did you share meaningful assessments, quality graphs and charts? Have someone else look at your chart and have them tell you what it says. If they capture what you know was what the changes were, then you know you got a good chart. Again, we've said this a number of times. You really have to clearly understand the difference between perception and outcome data. We cannot see kids reported that they liked the lessons in the outcome column, or the kids will tell 55% of the kids are now reporting that they feel safer on the buses. That's good information, but that's perception data, not outcome data. We think that assessments sometimes are too long and too complicated. You know, when you look at the amount of time that you actually get to spend with kids and teaching them, and you create a pre-post assessment that has 12 items on it, that's a lot to teach. That's a lot to accomplish. And so we always suggest that you stick to maybe 1 mindset and behavior or 2, and that drives maybe 3 to 4 items on a pre-post. And so it's really important that you are honest about how much time you have with kids and how much you can really change in that amount of time. And then again, using an outside pair of eyes to look at your charts and provide feedback is really helpful to this process, because that chart is really going to be viewed as you being able to clearly communicate what the impact was.
So pitfalls for the results report. Again, you're probably tired of hearing it, but confusion between perception and outcome data. There's probably not sufficient time in these webinars to provide all of that you need. So please check the website for other webinars that deal specifically with this. Read the books. Read the books. That's clearly explained there. Another common pitfall is not collecting the data. There has to be a data story for the results report. Poor perception data, where one of the common errors that's been in the past are perception data surveys used as pre-posts that ask some pretty basic and non-meaningful questions like, did you like it? Was it helpful? Would you recommend it? You know, that's not really the best example of perception data. Perception data is driven by your mindsets and behaviors. The data charts that are unclear, unhelpful, don't demonstrate impact is a danger, and the lack of reflection on implications of what you've learned through the data. It's not about having perfect outcomes. It's about understanding what your outcomes tell you about how to do it better, differently, more efficiently, more effectively. We hope that this has been helpful for you. Thank you for joining us on this webinar around core curriculum results reports. We hope it's been helpful.
And good luck with the process.